This is the DRF Players Podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Thomas Fornatel and Jonathan Kinchin.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Podcast. This is show 30, I believe, the Tuesday, April 24th edition. But it was in the books, not as any of those things, but instead as the Triple Crown Draft edition for 2018. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatal, back with you once again in Brooklyn bunker with Mug, handicapping Larmey, who played a critical role in our little draft side. Special guest today. We're going to start with them. First off is a guy who won his way essentially onto this show by, I think it was the first year of the DRF podcast draft, assembled a team of leftovers that actually ended up going pretty close. Since then, he has been a regular member of the team. We like him on from time to time. Big deal in the tournament, not only a fine player who has lots of screen time in the new Hawthorne contest show that just aired on NBC Sports Chicago. You also may know as the head of the NTRA Players Committee, guiding hand the NHC. Larmey. Chris, how are you today?
I'm good, Pete. Good morning, and hello to Justin and Matt.
Next up, the man who I like to call TV's Matt Bernier. News for Matt, he, in addition to all the places you normally see him, going to be seeing him as part of the new Horse Players Tour pilot being shot at Santa in a few weeks. The original host of this show, Matt, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Sorry for the little me getting on the phone call to make my oatmeal. And if I don't have the oatmeal, no, there was no hope for me in this draft.
Is that sound I was hearing, Matt? Was that a spoon clicking a bowl of oatmeal? That sound effect was?
It might hear it. I'm going to have to put it away.
No, it'll be okay. You just had to get the brown sugar and milk in there, thus that noise. And I think you get to the actual scooping, be silent as long as I don't question at exactly the wrong time. Our next guest is not a guest. He's a co-host. He's in fun. This is the guy I've been calling him lately, calling him the Baron of Break. But after performance last weekend on DRF, which he described himself as magnificent, this was just moments after describing an email he wrote to a friend as poetic. By the way, he's got a little Muhammad Ali thing going on lately. He's the first man of feeders. Since there were no direct qualifiers last weekend, he doesn't get a better title than that. But the first man of feeders, the people's champion, Jonathan Kinchin. What's up, JK?
Yeah, you said yesterday you were going to say that on air. I was hoping you'd forget.
So you don't deny it. I might have gone with just denying that you had called yourself magnificent and poetic within 2 minutes of each other.
You guys better be careful today. I'm in rare form. I'm in the middle of a parking war in my office building right now, so I'm feeling kind of fired up, ready to rock and roll.
He's not joking, folks. There's a few things that have happened in the history of this show, and to me, and to you too, JK, over the course of the last 2 years or so that would make for an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, but none more so than this parking war of which you speak. Can you describe it in an entertaining fashion in 2 sentences or less?
Not 2 sentences, but I can make it in 30 seconds or less. Long story short, I'm in an office building. The lady who's in charge of kind of the parking situation is a big fan of us, me and my partner. We always bring her food back from lunch, so she's very nice to us. So she kind of validates my parking so we don't have to pay the monthly fee. Well, there's this guy who is an office manager here who doesn't like me because he's found out that I'm doing this, but he can't really catch me. So he called and had them block me from even coming in today. And so I overrode him by telling them I was going to the breakfast place. I went to the breakfast place, ordered a bacon to go, got my ticket validated, and I took pictures of the receipt and the ticket in case he comes in here wanting to start beef. I'm going to show him both of those answers, and he can't touch me.
That is so amazingly petty, JK. I absolutely love it. Are you sure he's not just mad at you for continually beating him in head-to-heads? Are you sure it really has to do with that other thing?
That guy couldn't handicap himself out of a wet paper sack.
Serious question. JK is doing well in tournaments, clearly feeling himself lately. I'll throw this one to you, Chris Larmey. Is there a connection between the kind of mental state, the kind of on edge, feeling good about yourself way that JK clearly is now, and success in tournaments? How important is it to you to have that kind of a I can't lose mental state going into a contest?
Well, I'm not sure about the extreme confidence level that Jonathan seems to be experiencing right now. I don't know if I've experienced that before, but certainly you need to have some confidence, in your own ability in anything, not just in contest play. To be successful in anything, I think you need to have that confidence. But you have to be careful you don't get overly confident, because then you make different types of bad decisions. So a little bit of a balance there, but certainly you have to feel like you're capable of winning in any contest you enter.
Well, speaking of winning, brief history of this event. We started off in our first year, 2015. Kogan, podcast host, took honors that year. Still waiting for the box. I promised him. I never did making that. Maybe I can get a bulk discount and do the few years worth of bobbleheads all at the same time. Then had a weird year in 2016. We ended up with a three-way tie for, I described it last. JK farther back than that. But then JK redeems himself in 2017. JK, I'll let you tell the story. If you ever get unmuted. I guess he can't get himself unmuted for some reason. JK won not only all
I think he's getting molested about a parking space.
He might be back in there. He might. If that was probably wise to leave that on mute while he had his fight with the parking attendant. He won all 3 Triple Crown races and then ran up the score, even though it didn't count, by winning the Ohio Derby. Here's how the draft works. A draft order was chosen by a very scientific process this morning. We basically do a snake draft, 1 through 4, and basically we're drafting horses who will be accruing points throughout not just the Derby, but also the Preakness and the Belmont Stakes. I just want to test this out. JK, are you back? Is everything okay? Is your mic ongoing?
My bad. Someone called and I hit the wrong button. Instead of ignore, I hit answer. So my fault.
There you go. Hopefully everything is good. I was able to describe the Kinchin Slam, not quite in the bragging terms that I'm sure you would have, but, that's okay. We'll live with that. Okay, so we're familiar with the rules. Just to let you guys know, Chris originally had the first pick. JK, did you hear about the little trade we made?
You know what's funny is you guys took advantage of the fact that I was in the middle of parking gate, and we're on Twitter working out deals. I just looked on Twitter and noticed that this happened. This is absolutely disturbing. You guys are ganging up on me. I feel like the Patriots. You guys are going to say I'm deflating balls. This is unbelievable.
Matt Bernier, as the resident Pats fan, what do you think of JK's analogy there?
Well, I mean, you're not Belichick and Brady. It's a little bit over the top, don't you think? It's a little aggressive.
In his own mind, potentially. Basically, Chris and I have swapped first round and second round picks. Since it's a snake draft, what that means is I will pick first and 8th, and Chris will pick 3rd and 5th, and then for the third round, things will revert with Chris getting that 9th pick. Did I say that correctly, Chris?
That sounds right to me.
Excellent. Just want to make sure, because I have the very technical tracking system is in place here, and I want to make sure that I don't mess it up. And with that, I think we should start. We'll do this draft. If there's time left, we'll talk general things about the Derby, but obviously, wherever we want to pause, anything logical that comes up along the way, feel free to chime in. This can be a bit of a fire drill. It's part of the fun of this kind of show. I'm going to start things off very simply by picking the horse I think is the fastest and in the best hands, and I'm hoping he draws outside, and I'm hoping he can be heard from throughout this year's Triple Crown season. Of course, I'm talking about Justify with the number 1 pick for JK's close personal friend, Bob Baffert. JK, is this the one that you were hoping to trade up for, just to clarify?
Yeah, I just text B squared Bob Baffert, for those who don't know him as well as I do, and told him that unfortunately they're ganging up on me. I didn't get to pick Justify.
Hopefully he'll forgive you and still continue to confab with you on your many visits to Santa Anita, several of which will be coming up. TV's Matt Bernier, you're up next. Who are you going to pick in the first round of this year's Triple Crown draft?
You know, I tweeted that I thought this was going to be 2 years in a row because last year this happened, Pete, where you leapfrogged me to number one and you ended up taking Irish War Cry, and I wanted him all along, and I thought he would fall to me because Jonathan was number one. So when you jumped up here, I figured for sure you were going to take the horse that I wanted all along, and thankfully you didn't. So I'm going to take Mendelssohn. I understand anyone that has sort of concerns about this horse, but I got to be honest with you. Picking with the Derby, I think too many people make too much out of it. It's one race at the end of the day. You're right or you're wrong, but I think Mendelssohn's a special horse. He's been able to do things on different surfaces from different running styles. He's shipped all around the world. I think Mendelssohn might be the best horse in the race, and I'll take him at 2.
I don't disagree. I do think it is possible that he may only run in one of the U.S. Triple Crown races, even if he wins the Derby. Did you consider the possibility of them trying to do the once-in-a-lifetime, and I have no inside information here, and it does sound a little crazy as I'm saying it out loud, but that they might try to do the old Kentucky Derby, Epsom Derby double with this son of Scat Daddy?
I think it would be amazing from a racing standpoint. From our standpoint here, yeah, it would be a little bit disappointing, but at the same time, I kind of look at it and say, there's no guarantee about any of these horses going forward for the Preakness or the Belmont. I know they're going to run the first Saturday in May. Let me try to get points now and worry about the rest of it later on. But I think that would be fascinating if they chose to go a route like that. But the other thing, too, I guess, if you have any concerns, let's just say a horse like Mendelssohn were to win the Derby, the quick turnaround, that's not going to be a problem for Aidan O'Brien. We've seen him do that on bigger stages than this in the past internationally, not just sort of here in one spot. So, like I said, maybe I'm going to be entirely wrong here, but wouldn't be any different than a normal day. Wrong a lot. I think Mendelssohn might be the best horse.
Certainly Found comes to mind when you talk about international travel from Aidan O'Brien and competing in the 3 of the biggest races you could find over the course of 5 weeks and acquitting herself super well back in 2015. Chris Larmey, you made the deal to end up in this 3rd spot. Did you do that because is this going as you thought? Did you think it would be Justify Mendelssohn 1-2, and are you sitting on the pick that you wanted all along?
Yeah, I have respect for those two. I figured they'd go 1 and 2, but I'm not real excited about either of them. I've seen enough derbies where I've seen a lot of Justifies and Mendelssohns go down in flames, so I'm not quite as high on them as the two of you, although I do think the Mendelssohn story is kind of interesting. If he were to win a Derby, I wonder if they would ship him right back to Europe and then come back for the Preakness or leave him. That would seem crazy, but O'Brien does that a lot, ships back and forth. It'd be real interesting to see what they do with that horse if he were to win or run second, maybe. That'd be very interesting.
It's just such a great storyline to have at this year's Derby. Super excited about it. Who are you going to pick with number 3 here, Chris?
I like Good Magic, so that's who I'm going to go with. I might have been able to wait longer to pick him, but I wasn't sure how the 3 of you felt about him. But to me, he checks all the boxes. I mean, he's pointed to this race. Things have gone according to plan pretty much. I just think his last race was much better, I think, than people are giving him credit for. He was parked wide around the track, all the way around. According to Trackers, he was 55 feet further he ran than Flame Away. That's about 5 lengths, and that's on a track that certainly wasn't outside favoring. It was a legit, extra 55 feet. And if he had won that race by 5 or 6 lengths instead of 2, I think his price would be cut in half, and people would be a lot higher on him than they are. So I really like him. I think he's got tactical speed. He can finish. He's shown he can ship and win. He's shown he can run in big fields and win. To me, there just isn't really any weaknesses. Maybe he's not good enough, but he's the one I'd like as in terms of the most likely winner, in my opinion.
Let me ask you this about Good Magic. This type of pattern of having a horse ready to peak 3rd off a layoff, there are certain trainers who I associate with that move. Chad Brown, not typically one of them. He's somebody I think of who brings horses back from breaks or to the races fully formed, ready to fire their best efforts. Do you think it's possible, though, Chad Brown with this horse has devised a unique way of training him, because this is the first time he ever had a winter book favorite for the Kentucky Derby. And is that factoring into the way you see this at all, Chris?
Well, definitely, clearly the target for this horse wasn't his last race, and it wasn't his first race off the layoff. It was the Derby. So that part I'm pretty confident about, and that Chad Brown knows how to target a race. I think there's a big difference between training turf horses and dirt horses. Turf horses typically don't run hard for the entire race. They pretty much run hard maybe the last quarter and half mile. So it's a lot easier to get those horses ready off a layoff to run well than it is with a dirt horse. And I just think, with this, Good Magic, third race off the layoff makes a lot of sense. And I don't think he was fully cranked up until now. And even when you listen to Chad Brown, he even picked the progression of races so that there was, more time between his first race and his second race, and then a week less now, but, between the Bluegrass and the Derby. So, he's thought it all through, and I think he's where he wanted to be. I don't know if the horse is good enough. I think based on the numbers, he probably is, and that he's going to run a peak race. But I have pretty much a confidence that he's ready to run his race and that he hasn't had any problems. Everything's went to plan. So we'll see if he's good enough.
All right, JK, 2 picks in a row for you. Last pick of round 1, first pick of round 2. Where are you going?
Yeah, Chris is right. If he wouldn't have, he's wrong. If he wouldn't have picked Good Magic, I was going to. Hanging around Lexington, I heard some Chad Brown confidence chatter about Good Magic and his ability to run well there. So good pick by Chris. I'm going to take 2. Obviously, I'm going to go with Bolt Doro and Free Drop Billy.
Did we lose you there, JK? Or are you
No, I'm right here.
Us?
Yeah, no,
okay.
Bolt Doro and Free Drop Billy. It did make a weird sound in my ear, but I think we're all still happily together.
That feels maybe a little early for Free Drop Billy. Tell me about your enthusiasm for him.
Yeah, no, I just it's my love for Dale at Churchill and this race with a horse who's kind of always shown up and I saw work from him at Churchill, galloped out really big there. I think he's one that I don't think necessarily he's going to win. I think that you or Matt probably picked the winner. So I'm just looking to pick up some points and maybe continue to pick up points along the way. Dale will dance all the dances. Even if he skips the Preakness with this horse, he'll show up at the Belmont. So there's an opportunity to pick up some points there. And so I part of my whole thing with these is that I want to pick horses that I like. Obviously Audible, Vino Rosso, Enticed. These are all horses that Magnum Moon that someone might pick in this position, but I want a horse that I actually believe in, and I'm not a huge fan of any of those. So I just went ahead and snagged Free Drop Billy now.
Let's pause on Bolt Doro for a second. Is there an opportunity here that this is a horse who has at a stage now where he's almost a little bit under the radar, having a couple of potential excuses in the last race, one being the shape of the race in the Santa Anita Derby, which the way he was ridden to me suggested they were not as much worried about winning that race as just keeping him along a progression to peak on the first Saturday in May. And also the idea that if he really was, as trainer Mick Ruiz said, 80% fit for 2 races back, had the experience before the Breeders' Cup of maybe having him peak too early, maybe the idea has been to leave something in reserve for him to show his best race on the biggest stage. Matt, I'm curious to get your thoughts on Bolt Doro, and if you buy either of those arguments I just made, why he might be ready to step up and run his A race on the first Saturday in May.
Yeah, 100% agree. I kind of feel like you can make a case that his 2 3-year-old races are as good or better than almost anyone else's, probably with the exception of Justify, because I thought his return effort in that San Felipe when it was tooth and nail, an absolute battle with McKenzie, was very, very strong considering it was his first start since the Breeders' Cup. And then his Santa Anita Derby, I'm 100% in agreement with you. I don't think there was any way that he was going to win that race with the way that it was run. It was almost as if they ran the race saying, let Justify go, get your win now, we'll try to get you in 4 weeks. I think there's a serious case to be made that his 2 races as a 3-year-old are as good or better than almost everyone else's.
JK, you've expressed in previous comments on the show a little bit of skepticism about Bolt Doro, so I'm interested that you grabbed him when you did. Any, for people who know how you felt about the horse all along, any explanation for the newfound enthusiasm?
Yeah, I'm not overly enthusiastic about any of the Todds, who I think were probably obvious picks in that spot where I was at: Magna Moon, Audible, Noble Indy, or Vino Rosso. So it kind of left me with a horse who's running triple-digit buyers. He's done it 3 to 4 times in his career. Once as a 2-year-old with that huge performance in the front runner. I'm a little bit concerned that he hasn't crossed the wire in front of another horse, in front of the he hasn't crossed the wire first in his last 3 starts, which is a little bit concerning. But like you said, he's a talented horse. It seems like they've made some missteps along the way with him, either too cranked, not cranked enough, or maybe it's all part of a master plan. I've been trying to explain to some kind of new people to the game, like I want fast horses, and the buyers and the figures, the time form figures, all suggest that this is a fast horse, and so that's good enough for me when I'm picking out of a pool of horses I think are going to run second, because I think Justify is your Derby winner.
Chris, we're back to you for this 6th pick. What are you going to go with?
Just one comment on Bolt Doro. This is
Please.
Probably too far back for Jonathan and Matt, but do you remember the year that Indian Charlie and Real Quiet ran in the Santa Anita Derby?
1998, my first Kentucky Derby. I remember it well.
And the reason I bring that up is Indian Charlie was this brilliant, undefeated speedster who had a huge tactical advantage in the Santa Anita Derby and galloped home, and Real Quiet kind of gamely chased him, but really never threatened. And then Baffert just thought Indian Charlie could not lose in the Derby, and Real Quiet wins, and Indian Charlie third. And I remember after the race, they were interviewing Bob Baffert, and last year when Arrogate lost to Collected, Baffert kind of looked like he was in shock. Even though he had just won a Grade 1 race, he was sort of in shock that Arrogate had lost. That's exactly how he looked in the Derby that year when Real Quiet beat Indian Charlie. So Bolt Doro and Justify, Indian Charlie, and Real Quiet. It's kind of an interesting parallel there.
I see it. I definitely see it, and I don't even need to squint that hard. We'll have to see if the roles will remain the same as we head forward. Sounds like Bolt Doro's one you might have grabbed had he been around. With him off the board, which way are you going to head here?
Yeah, I was hoping Jonathan, he'd been bad-mouthing that horse. I thought he might not pick him, and I could get my other horse I really wanted. And I would have been like in cherry pink for this draft, but unfortunately, no. So now it gets a little tougher because I think we've got the top horses kind of off the table. I was really torn between several, but I'm going to go with Vino Rosso or whatever.
Rosso, come on. He's
Rosso,
in the Derby.
right.
You got to get his name
right.
right.
Okay, sorry. And I'm picking him, so I better say his name right. He's a weird horse because if you look at his paper, he loves Aqueduct, and he just didn't like Tampa at all. So I'm wondering, is Churchill more like Aqueduct or is it more like Tampa? And I'm going to opt towards being more like Aqueduct because his 2 races in Aqueduct have been pretty brilliant, really. He did get a setup in his last, but he sure ran well, and he's bred to like the distance, and he seems to be the kind of horse that might have gotten right just at the right time. Now, maybe he peaked one race too early, which happens as well, but if he could run back to that race he just ran, I think he could be dangerous. And if he doesn't win the Derby, Pletcher has a good record in the Belmont, and this could be a horse that I'd expect to see run back in New York. So if I can't get any points on Derby Day, maybe I can pick something up on Belmont.
All right, Matt, where are you going to take us next?
I'm going to go to Audible. I think he's the best of the Pletcher horses. I like Vino Rosso. I've liked him for some time. I've got him in a fantasy league that I'm in. I think he's the horse, like Chris had said. I wouldn't be surprised if he runs well in Kentucky and then runs really well at Belmont. But Audible, I was torn when he won that first race, the Holy Bull, just simply because he did everything mechanically wrong. He was early with the lead change, and he popped back to his left lead at the wire. But it's hard to argue that he ran fast. And then in that most recent run, I know they got a setup, he and Hofberg, but he ran away from Hofberg at the end of the race. And I know Hofberg's light on experience, but Audible is just one of those horses. He's paired up Beyer tops in each of his 2-3-year-old starts. I think that's a positive move. And, as much as I know it's a small sample size and it's easy to sort of, overrate certain things, but since this new point system has been implemented, the road from Florida has been the most productive road going into Kentucky. He hasn't done anything wrong since his career debut. I'll go with Audible.
Some very interesting money internationally for Audible. Best price around that I'm seeing, 7-1. So the international market definitely agreeing with that pick. Had I picked where you picked, Matt, I would have gone with Audible. But with you taking Audible, I'll grab another one of the Pletchers, the other one flying in the face of the curse of Apollo, Magnum Moon for me with the 8th pick. I'm not wildly enthusiastic about the last race. I didn't love the way he ran through the stretch, but it sounds like that was a case of greenness as opposed to some sort of underlying injury as I read the tea leaves. And he's shown he can finish. He hasn't really shown he can run fast early and finish. That's what he's going to have to do on the first Saturday in May. But I think on a talent basis alone, this undefeated, untested horse is the one who I'll take to close out the second round. And now we have a little bit of a do-si-do in the draft order. With Chris and my trade completed, we go back to him for the first pick in round 3.
And I'm really happy. I wasn't sure I would have this horse available, but I do. I like Hofburg as my number 3 pick. I don't know if you guys have read any of the tweets I sent out, but I build a model that projects out how fast a horse will run based on its 1 1/8 time in its final Derby prep, how that would project out to 1 1/4 just using some straight math. And in the last 4 years, the fastest horse projected out has won the Derby. And this year, the model says Hofburg has the fastest projected finish out of the 1 1/4. So, I mean, there's some negatives with him, but I think he has some upside. And certainly Bill Mott has been very aggressive in the way he spotted this horse, which is not his usual way of doing things. And he's really responded well. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if he runs a big one on Derby Day.
I see that as a positive, the fact that it's so not a Mott thing to rush a horse. That tells me that the horse is touting himself and saying he's ready for this type of challenge. I think he's interesting, and I think he's another who's potentially interesting as we move forward to the Belmont Stakes as well, a race where Mott has had, plenty of success, really, when you look back at his record relative to the other Triple Crown races, certainly. Matt, we're back to you.
Yeah, I'm kind of in no man's land now. I don't necessarily love any of these horses that are left. I think there are some interesting ones. I suppose maybe this is a silly mistake, and I'm just going to go with all the numbers. I'll go with Noble Indy. He's a little bit slow right now, but I kind of feel like that Louisiana Derby is a really polarizing race to me because I don't think necessarily the quality was tremendous, but it is worth noting my boy Jack came back to win that Lexington impressively. It was his first start with blinkers, and I guess the jury is out. Did he idle when he hit the front? Or was it a matter of I don't even know. Was it a matter of Lone Sailor completely hitting the wall at 9 furlongs? Was it my boy Jack just, running 15 paths off the rail? I don't know. I'm going to lean toward Noble Indy being a little bit green. Velasquez said as much. We'll find out. I don't think he's good enough to win a race like the Derby, but maybe he can get a small minor award. And I've never loved him, but I have to acknowledge he has that sort of upward trajectory as far as his figures are concerned.
Got to make some bets on the come at this stage in the draft, that's for sure. Both Hofburg and Noble Indy can be purchased internationally, 25-1 type chances. JK, I know you're still cussing me for what I did to you trading up for that first pick that I know you wanted. There's one other horse so far that you and I have both discussed liking on the podcast throughout the year so far. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and take him so you don't take him with one of your next 2 picks. And that's Combatants, who I think has shown ability and feels to me like a horse who, pari-mutually speaking, is obviously more of a 3rd or 4th type when it comes to the Kentucky Derby. But I feel like is another who, if there were a Belmont-specific future book, would be a lot shorter than the current Derby odds of 50-1 and was recently 75-1. This was the other horse I was going to bet when I walked into the betting shop in England and was told by the clerk that they weren't taking betting on the Derby yet. And as one of the top 10 pro punters in the UK today, Rob Dove, told me at the time, you should have had him ring up the office. But instead, there was some other beer bar I was trying to get to, and I didn't feel like bothering to make a stink. So I let it go. I let him go at 75-1, still available at 50-1, and he'll be my pick in the third round here for this year's podcast draft. And that sends us back to you, JK. Are we still on speaking terms?
Yeah, we're on. I mean, I was gonna pick him in my next array, but we're having 5 horses, right? Or 4?
JK, try math and see if you succeed or fail.
No, are we gonna do? No, I'm asking a
5.
question. I'm not 5. Okay. All right. Well, I'll save my sleeper pick for later then, because no one else will take him. I'm gonna do Promises Fulfilled. And just to be annoying, I'm gonna take Instilled Regard.
What? Why?
That's dirty pool.
Oh, is this? You knew Matt was ready for that one?
Yeah, I just don't want these other horses. I don't want these other horses. If he buys me like dinner and picks another horse that I like, I could potentially trade him later. But
we can trade. I think trades are definitely trades can still happen. So, but no collusion. We don't want any of that nonsense in here. We spent too much time on this show railing against that type of coordination for that. But if it's a fair trade anyway, and there happens to be a dinner involved, that's something that we can discuss. Talk to me about. I find the Romans. I feel like there's something strategic about your going back to the Romans well there, JK. Is that fair to say?
No, I just think that this horse will be. I've talked about how I think Dale can get one ready for this race. He's done well in here before with Patio Prado and Shackelford. Was I think 4th in the Derby, and his horses usually show up. They're galloping well. The distance doesn't seem to be an issue. Promises Fulfilled was ran a nice figure with a slow pace 2-back, but then was in like a suicidal pace duel last time. So he'll be fit out for that. He'll be ready to rock and roll. He'll be forwardly placed in these 1 1/4 classic races, or 1 3/16 or 1.5 races that we talk about. Closers don't really have a great advantage in, and so he'll be around. Obviously he's not my pick in any regard to win the race, but he's definitely one that I think could get a piece of it at a big price.
Okay, I'm out of horses that I quote unquote like myself, so I can let the market pick for me, or I can try to be cute. I guess I'll just let the market pick for me and go with Enticed. The only other horse I can think of who's probably less than 50-1 internationally, and he probably checks in at about 40. There's not a whole lot of reasons why I can say Enticed is going to finish above horses we've talked about already. But with the level of work I've done at this point, my sleeper game is not going to be very strong in this year's edition of the draft. So I'll just take Enticed and move on. And Matt, are you going to try to make a little move to get back on the Instilled Regard train here, or do you have another direction you're going to go?
Well, I mean, I got to be honest with you. I hope he wins for Jonathan, because then at that point, whatever, I'll be very, very content. I don't need him in the pool here. I'll be well off. But no, I mean, I don't have anything that I could offer as far as a trade is concerned, I think, to make it worthwhile, unless he wanted something with Noble Indy. But my top 2, I wouldn't want to move them. And I guess that leaves me now. I'm at the point where I have 3 horses now.
You have 3 horses now.
Yeah, I have a horse that I want to take, but I don't think this is the spot to take him because he's not going to run in the Derby. I guess I'll go. This horse is honest. He shows up. He's probably not good enough to win the Derby, but how can you knock anything that Flame Away has done? He may not be brilliant, but I like the try in him. He goes out there. He can win from on the lead. He can win from just off of it. I think he'll be forwardly placed. Maybe he's the one that pushes Promises Fulfilled early. I don't think he can win, but why can't he pull some sort of a Shackelford type of move where he gets brave and leads for a long way? I know there was soft fractions in that Derby, and then he comes back and runs well in the Preakness. So I'll go with Flame Away.
He was the other I was thinking of. That was really just a jump ball between Enticed and Flame Away for me. So I definitely see where you're coming from there at that point of the draft. Chris, do you have horses left you like, or are you sort of just guessing at this point?
Oh, I mean, I sort of looked through the whole list and had my bottom feeders that I thought might be worth throwing in. So I'm going to go with My Boy Jack. I don't think he's a Derby winner, but he's got a nice burst of speed. He's got a rider who can do some brilliant rides and some really bad rides. But if he does a brilliant ride and he times this horse's move right and he picks his way through traffic, My Boy Jack could certainly get a piece of it. So, to me at this point, he seems like the one to pick.
All right. And then you're up right again for the first pick in the final round, Chris.
All right. This is where it gets interesting. I was trying to get cute this year, like last year, and pick a Preakness horse. I guess I could go with Quip maybe, but it just doesn't excite me much. So I'm going to go with Solomini, who's been sort of disappointing this year. I thought he would have done more at this point, but he does have some excuses, and he does go for an outfit that likes to run them. So maybe even if he doesn't win the Derby, maybe he could hit the board and maybe run back in the Preakness or something. So maybe I can pick up some points with Solomini. So
it makes sense. And I misspoke before when I talked about Enticed being the sort of the market pick of the ones left. Solomini 25-1 internationally to Entice 40-1. So I guess that tells you something about what I think about Solomini, that I discounted him, even though I was using the market as a guide. But the case you make is good, and at this stage of the draft, it makes sense. Certainly wouldn't be the first forgotten Baffert horse to make noise in a big spot. JK, what do you think of that idea? Is there? I know you've been a little cynical about Solomini to this point, but would it shock you to see him run well?
No. I mean, he'll dance all the dances, or at least a couple of them. So, in these late rounds, you want something to get you points later. I mean, obviously, we all kind of picked the ones we thought have the best chance of winning early. But now you just want to try to pick up. You want to pick up points for running second, third, or you want to be at least in the gate to have a chance.
Pick those horses in the gate. Matt Bernier, you are up.
Yeah, this is kind of my my Belmont pick. I was talking to Illman about it probably right after the Wood. I think if Restoring Hope can get to the Belmont, I think like if I could pick a horse right now, I'd pick him. I feel like he's the kind of horse that trip just didn't work out for him in the Wood for a number of reasons, but he's not going to blow you away with anything. He's not overly fast, but I think he'll just run all day and he'll throw down 24 and change, 25 sort of quarter miles. And really that's the important thing you need in a race like the Belmont. So he's been working. I would hate to see him run in the Preakness. I would hope they would just wait until a race like the Belmont if they were going to bring him back from one of the big ones. But I think there's something here. I've never loved him, but now I'm warming up to him a little bit, particularly in those longer races. I'll go with Restoring Hope.
JK's close personal friend, Bob Baffert, with both selections in the final round here so far. For my last pick, I'm going to do the Preakness move that Chris had mentioned before and go ahead and take Quip here. I thought this was a really interesting story this week. The Quip, while having the points to run in the Derby, electing Winstar, Rudy Brissett, electing to go to the Preakness. One of the most interesting things about it to me was if the way it's been reported is correct, which I have no reason to believe that it isn't, the idea that a trainer as new out on his own as Brissett would have elected to miss the opportunity to run in the Derby to do what he felt was best for the horse, and that's give him that extra week after he was originally rerouted to go to the Arkansas Derby in the hopes of getting a grade 1 there. Felt like a very quite sensible owner call. This call apparently coming from him first, immediately seconded by Elliott Walden and the folks at Winstar. I just thought that's the kind of thing that just makes me look very favorably upon Brissett. A lot of people in this game, chance to run in the Derby, that's so much of what the game is about. They would have jumped at that and said, you could probably use the extra week, but we're going to do this anyway, instead to make that move. That impressed me. What did you think, JK?
Yeah, we talked about Rudy on the podcast about how I think he's got a real promising career ahead of him. I know that he's got a great relationship with Winstar. he's one of the guys that I believe they send their horses to originally. And I might be speaking out of school, but I believe that Justify was with him for a small, not that he was ever like with him in training, but like all of their horses kind of go to Rudy for a second, for a work or two or a couple months, and then they get sent out to the trainers they'll go to. I believe that Justify was one of those. So he's got a great relationship with them. He's going to be supported. This will not be his last Derby. WinStar's got 3 runners, and they were involved or bred or sold 5 runners. I think they bred Bolt Doro. So there's a bunch of opportunities for him down the line, and I commend him for doing what's best for the horse and taking a little bit of an easier route for a horse that's probably not qualified to try to win the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, I mean, mentally it seems like he still has some work to do, and horses like that, to let them go at their own pace, it makes sense. I think if you take a horse like that who still has seems like he's pretty strong the way he moves in races, you push a horse like that too much, you might lose him. You take care of him, hopefully he'll take care of you. JK, last pick in this year's Triple Crown draft.
Hold on, I'm getting a text right now from B Squared. Yeah, I'm gonna take if Justify wins the Derby, which I think he will, then this pick doesn't matter. If for whatever reason Justify doesn't win the Derby and is not running in the Preakness, you won't see this horse. But I'm gonna pick Axeman for Bob Baffert.
Interesting.
Allowance winner, impressively. I believe it was a triple-digit buy. I don't have the buy in front of me. It was fast. That he won by 8. Easy. They've always this horse, and I think that for whatever reason, if he happens to show up in a Preakness that doesn't have a Triple Crown on the line, I would think that he'd be one that could be dangerous.
All right, we'll be tweeting out these teams. We'll be following along, and we got to let the winner get something this year. Obviously, we weren't going to give you anything last year, JK. We figured just letting you brag as obnoxiously as you did, that was better than any trophy or bobblehead. Hopefully this year we can come up with something a little bit better. I think we should spend the rest of the show, and we've got a few minutes left here, talking about the race generally. And we had a bunch of questions come in conveniently about head-to-head matchups. But the biggest question that we got from more than one person concerned the Derby pace. And I want to hear from all 3 of you about your views. And obviously, I think this is a year where the draw, I think, is much more important than it even usually is, because there are so many horses that seem to have a similar running style. So that's sort of a given. But how you see the pace shaking out, what type of horses it might favor, what type of different pace scenarios you might account for in your multi-race bets. Matt, we'll start with you on what you think of this year's Derby pace scenario.
I think it should be honest at the very least. Maybe not the 45 that we've seen in the past, or even the 46 I think that we got 2 years ago. But I think it's going to be, you brought up the biggest point. There are so many horses that have a similar running style. And then you've also got to factor in, Promises Fulfilled seems like everybody is or most people are in agreement that he is going to be the main controlling speed of the race. Not necessarily controlling, but the main speed. He's going to go. Now you get into sort of the murkier waters where, like you say, depending on the post draw, if you're Magnum Moon, in that most recent run, he won outright on a lead, but I can't imagine them going that slow where he is that close. Is he going to come from 3 or 4 off of it? You got a horse like Audible, where 2 starts back. He was right up on it, and then all of a sudden they go fast, and he's coming from 7 out of it. So it's one of those things. I think it's going to take a little bit of time to wait and see. You got to wait and see how they're training, how the post position works out. But I think at the very least it's going to be honest, and there's a scenario where it could heat up, and there's also a scenario where if everyone is content saying, well, Promises Fulfilled will come back to us at some point, then maybe it ends up being a little bit more pedestrian than we think at face value. But I'll leave it at honest at best.
JK, we'll go to you since you picked Promises Fulfilled. Is there some part of your brain that's accounting for a softer than expected trip for Promises Fulfilled, with everyone just sort of saying, okay, he's a long shot, he's going to go to the lead?
No, I mean, I'm not expecting a 47 with 11 horses that want to stalk or be near the pace. There's 4 Todds. They all run the same way. Obviously Justify. Bolt Doro's closer than most. And the other thing is that Promises Fulfilled, being a speed horse, is a stablemate of a horse who's going to come from off of it. So those are all recipes for a swift pace. I just picked Promises Fulfilled because he was in a very fast speed duel last time where he fell apart. He's shown the ability to finish a race in good company in the Fountain of Youth, and I think he'll be forwardly placed. That's what I look for. If you're going to be in the first 6 horses, then I kind of like you a little bit, especially in a big race like that, where I feel like you have a better shot of not getting a bad trip when you put yourself into the race. And we've seen the stats. If you're leading at the 8th pole, or you got to be within a length at the 8th pole to win this race. And so I feel like Promises Fulfilled will be within that in that spot.
We talk all the time on this show about the concept of race design, trying to see the way a race is going to play out on the track in your head before you see it on the actual racetrack. JK, for you at this stage, without knowing the post position draw, is there any point in trying to design this race?
Yeah, no, I don't even. It's not even something I've tried to imagine in my head, because it doesn't matter until we find out where they draw. If Promises Fulfilled draws the 20. Things change. If he draws the 1, if Justify draws, I don't even want to say it. If he draws a red thing, then he's in trouble. So there's a lot of different scenarios, and you need to see that. You need to see where the riders line up, and who shows up where. I know most of those things are already kind of determined, but no, I cannot design the race until I see where they draw.
What do we not know? Who do we not know who's riding whom? And that one's to the whole group. I'm just sort of blurting that question out. What's unknown still jockey-wise?
I don't know. Do you know of any, Matt?
Noble Indy? Does anybody know who's riding Noble Indy?
Yeah, he's loose, I believe. I don't think anybody has him just yet. Outside of that, I think most of them are pretty well sewn up, but the obvious one was Noble Indy. Yeah, at this point, I don't think he has anybody announced just yet.
And I'm sure this was on the pages of DRF. I didn't have a chance to look yesterday, but the suspension talk with Kent won't affect this race, correct?
I can't imagine that it would. I mean, you've seen instances in, I'll just use California as an example. I remember there was a little while ago that Flavian Prat had like a 4-day suspension, but for some reason he was allowed to ride in the major stakes race on Saturday. Like, I think there's
they'll typically exclude the greatest stakes for something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, even if for some reason he was sidelined for X amount of time, I can't imagine this or any of these races on Churchill on that Saturday would be affected.
Chris, I want to ask you your thoughts on this year's Derby pace, along with the question of how useful do you think it is to try to talk pace this far out before we have all the final information?
Well, I'm glad you brought it up, because I actually did a little research based on a discussion you and Jonathan had about how you thought going to the Derby point system had impacted the pace scenario of the Derby, and that cool. Might be one possible explanation for why.
Just to reiterate, Chris, for folks who don't know, it's my theory that the lack of the sprinters who used to get in for graded earnings as opposed to running in these points races as 3-year-olds has let the best horses control the paces more. Therefore, it's not a coincidence that it's been basically a string of favorites winning the race since the advent of the new point system. So you did some research to see if that was just me talking or if there was any validity to it. What did you find?
Yeah, I thought it made sense. But you know me, I like to check the data. So I went and looked at time form, and you can go all the way back to 2004. So I had a sample of races before the points change, and then from 2012 up is when they started the point system. And if you look at the first fraction, the quarter mile speed rating, the modern one post points is 165, which is pretty fast. That's the max. That's the max. The min was 132, and the median was 157, which is on the quick side. And that's definitely with the point system. Prior to the point system, the max was 165, the same. The min 120, actually a little slower, and the median 147. So, it was very similar for the other two fractions. So, if you look at the data, it doesn't really support the pace being any slower post-point system. If anything, it's been faster.
That's
or
interesting.
The same. So,
that's very interesting.
Yeah.
The two things that come to mind, and it sounds like you did check this. You checked the fraction I'd be more interested in the first quarter would be the pace call. And it was those same dynamics were reflected in looking at the 6 furlong number.
Yeah, if you look at the 6 furlong number, they're about the same. 4
That's
furlongs, it slowly kind of regresses. It's the biggest differences on the first quarter, a little bit of a difference on the second at the half mile, and at the 6 furlong call, they're basically the same. So, you could argue maybe they're the same, but it'd be hard to argue that things have slowed down since they went to the point system.
It's always good to look at the data. Sometimes these narratives, even if they make sense, I'm always happier to bet my money when the data bears out the little hypothesis. I wouldn't say that completely turfs the hypothesis, because I think there are things that happen in terms of dynamics when the jockey has to make the decision of what to do about that sprinter. Bodemeister deciding to stay in front of Trinnyberg, knowing that there's basically a grade 1 quality sprinter in behind, that still affect the way that the race plays out on the track. But it is interesting that does not. I would have guessed that it would have been a little bit more supported by the data. What do you think about? You go ahead, JK.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting, and I don't know what it would tell you, but I want to know the answer, and I'm going to look at it when we get off. I want to know prior to the point system. So let's just call it post points and then or pre-points and post points. Pre-points, I want to know who those horses were that were leading at the 6 furlong call and where did they finish? And then who were the horses that were leading the 6 furlong call post and where did they finish?
I have that for you, Jonathan.
Okay. Let's do it.
I have that. So I'll just really quickly run through the most recent one. State of Honor finished 19th. Danzig Candy 15th. Dortmund 3rd. Uncle Si 14th. Palace Malice 12th. And Bodemeister 2nd. So that's the post points. The pre-points was Shackelford 4th. He got away with probably the slowest pace in recent history. Conveyance 15th. Join the Dance 7th. Bob Blackjack 16th. Hard Spun 2nd. Keyed Entry 20th. Spanish Chestnut 16th. And Lionheart 2nd. So you had Lionheart and Hard Spun and Shackelford kind of quality speed prior to the point system. You have sort of Bodemeister, Palace Malice, and Dortmund were sort of the quality speed post point system.
No winners, which is surprising.
No, none of them. But you did get a strong second from Bodemeister, and Hard Spun ran a big race, and Lionheart too. So you can hang on, but it's hard to win on that front end. I think the last horse to win on the front end that I can think of was probably War Emblem.
War Emblem is the one that came to my mind, and that was what year was that? 2002. I don't like testing my memory like that.
Yeah, we didn't have the time form charts for that. And then, of course, there's been, Spin to Buck was probably the most brilliant wire-to-wire winner. Although I guess you could argue Seattle Slew is another one that was won the front end.
But that's going way back there.
Way back, sure. Right.
Yeah,
the track.
Go ahead, Chris.
No, I mean, things have changed quite a bit in the last 30 or 40 years for sure. But, I don't know if you can make if the pace dynamic has really changed that much. I think it might be as much a 20-horse field as anything else that kind of drives the pace dynamic. But, it's a complicated question.
Timeform US, we've been talking about it a bunch. You can visit their, you can look at their data if you have a total subscription already. There's a pace projector, which has Justify as the fastest horse in the race early and has promises fulfilled in behind that, with then a gap to Enticed and Magnum Moon and Snapper Sinclair, who won't be competing. It doesn't seem like. It's worth checking out, having a look at the Timeform US. And also, DRF now has the Advanced Derby PPs available for sale if you want to check those out on DRF.com. We've got 5 minutes left. I wanted to look at some of the head-to-head wagers that are available. John Avello at The Win sent out an email earlier this week, and we got a question about checking them out. Have any of you three gentlemen looked at these already, or shall I just let you know what they are? But does anybody have a head-to-head for this year's Derby that they're excited about?
I glanced at them. I'm trying to remember. There was a couple that I liked.
I'll read them through. I'll read them through. There's not that many. Magnum Moon versus Good Magic. Good Magic versus Justify. Obviously, these have odds attached to them. And if folks are interested in any one, I will read the odds. I'm not going to do the odds on every one. Free Drop Billy versus Hofburg. My Boy Jack against Vino Rosso. Enticed against Flame Away. Audible against Bolt Doro. Bravazzo against Lone Sailor. A couple of undrafted ones for us. Solomini Noble Indy. Mendelssohn against Magnum Moon. Firenze Fire against Promises Fulfilled. Bolt Doro against his old friend Good Magic. And Magnum Moon against Justify. JK, which of those were the ones that you were interested in?
Yeah, I liked Good Magic versus Magnum Moon. Justify versus anybody. Enticed versus Flame Away, Free Drop Billy versus Hofburg, and Promises Fulfilled versus Firenze Fire, who is as Exaggerator would say it, one-turn horse.
Oh, come on. Are you still on that thing? You said you buried the hatchet. You tweeted the picture. He has a body of work that suggests otherwise, and yet you're still insisting.
We agreed to disagree is what we talked about.
Well, next time we're at WinStar, I'm really going to see if I can get him to bite you. That's all I have to say about that. You almost named too many for me to follow up. Pick one of those that's your favorite so I can ask you why.
I like Free Drop Billy versus Hofburg. I think Hofburg is going to grab a lot of people's attention because of the things that we all talked about. This is not a Bill Mott move. This is not a Bill Mott type of horse. This horse is doing things that the trainer's record doesn't suggest he should be doing, which leads us to believe he's extremely talented. I think because of that, he's minus 150 versus the plus 120 of a trainer who does do this very well with an experienced horse with 2-year-old form on his home track. Give me Free Drop Billy at plus 120.
Do you see Hofburg as sort of more of a run first or maybe second or run out type, or are you just against Hofburg?
I just think I think that you know, our friend Mike Hogan pointed out that it's funny people want to criticize Justify for not having enough experience. And obviously we do realize that the price is the big reason why that makes sense. But Hofburg has enough experience to win. I just think that he's going to be back. He's going to be eating dirt. He's likely going to have to either travel wide or get very lucky inside. He just feels like a horse that's going to get stopped that, you know, you bet in the Jim Dandy.
All right, I want to do a head-to-head or talk to Matt and Chris about head-to-head thoughts. Chris, did any of those intuitively appeal to you, or would you want to hear the prices anyway on any of those head-to-heads that I mentioned?
Well, I mean, not seeing the prices. I mean, clearly the way I drafted, I think Good Magic versus Magnum Moon, much prefer Good Magic. In fact, probably I would bet against Magnum Moon on all of the ones. There were 3 or 4 of those. I think he's one of the biggest underlays in the race. I don't like him at all. And he hasn't been in a single race with any kind of pace at all. And he likes to be forwardly placed. There's nothing about that horse that gets me excited. I think the fact he's undefeated and trained by Todd Pletcher, and he's going to get way over bet. And so to me, he's a play against. And so from a head-to-head standpoint, that's the one I'd like to pick on the head-to-head.
You have a chance at minus 120 with Good Magic to oppose him, minus 110 Mendelssohn to oppose him, and you have to lay the wood if you want to take Justify against him and go minus 180. But those all sound good to you?
Yeah, I would take all 3 of those probably. I think Good Magic is the best play of those 3 for sure.
Matt Bernier, any head-to-heads that catch your fancy for this year's Kentucky Derby?
Yeah, what were the prices on Vino Rosso and My Boy Jack?
Vino Rosso minus 125, My Boy Jack minus 105.
Yeah, I think I would probably buy into Vino Rosso there. I think they are going to run similarly, but the difference is I think Vino Rosso gets the jump on My Boy Jack and inherently has a major advantage. I think he's going to finish just as well as My Boy Jack, but starting 4 or 5 lengths in front of him, and that to me is is enough reason alone to be looking at a horse like that. Sure, you may be getting a little bit of a shorter number, but if it's just one over the other, I can run 8th and have the other horse run 9th and I still win. So yeah, I think Vino Rosso, to me, that would be the most interesting one.
All right, we'll be tweeting out all of our draft selections here in fairly short order. I can send around my chicken scratch, or an enterprising listener can help us as what happened to us last year, and somebody can tweet something that actually looks nice. Really had fun.
I have a nice table. Pete, that I put together. I'll tweet out here in a second with all the picks.
That'd be extremely helpful. Really enjoyed putting this crew together for this show. We'll have to reconvene at some point during the Triple Crown season. Going to be a lot of special coverage happening. Matt, I want to give you a chance. I know most of our listeners, viewers are the same, but give folks a little rundown of where they can catch your work on the Triple Crown coming up in the next few weeks.
Yeah, so coming up this week, I'm off basically for the rest of this week because I have a wedding to go to. But then starting up next week, we'll have the recap edition of the Matt Bernier Show. That's going to be right on after. Are you guys Tuesday, Wednesday next week?
We are going to do Wednesday, Thursday.
Okay, so Tuesday at noon, it'll be basically all of the prep race leading into. Then you guys will be on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'll come on Friday with the preview of and Derby, and then on Saturday I'll just be DRF live stuff. We'll have obviously all these previews and videos that we put out, contender profiles and nature. You can find on the Daily Race Forms YouTube channel. If you do go over there, click the subscribe button, and then also video.drf.com.
Excellent. I will be doing 2 special seminars next week as well. One with Jay Privman and Craig Milkowski on Wednesday night. And then I'm going to have Mike Watchmaker and Andy Byer on Thursday night. Those are both going to be 7 Eastern. You can join live or catch the replays on drf.com/YouTube. JK, anything special to promote as far as the World Horse Players Tour is concerned?
Yeah. This weekend on Sunday, there's a $458 feeder, 1 in 12.
Not a feeder, a qualifier.
A qualifier, excuse me. Yeah, I said feeder because I've been so good in feeders lately. No qualifiers.
Oh, jeez.
I'm just hoping everything's a feeder. So no, that'll be fun on Sunday. I think so. The action's picking up. Saratoga was just posted this week. Del Mar is up. The Belmont contest is up. Monmouth Pick Your Prize is up. A lot of opportunities to get involved on DRF tournaments.
Hopefully some fun things, some fun announcements coming up about the last few qualifiers for the World Horse Players Tour as well. Of course, that's going to be going down May 19th and 20th at Santa Anita. Chris, you go ahead, JK.
You tried to set me up, and I didn't fall for it.
It's not the first time, JK, but that's all right. Go ahead.
We are, and we'll tweet about it in more detail. The person who handles the most between now and the last chance, the Sunday before the World Horse Players Tour Preakness Challenge, the last feeder we'll have there's going to be a 1 in 5, $1,090 game. So 1 in 5 guys will get a seat, or gals will get a seat to the WHT. If you handle the most in WHT contest starting this Wednesday until that point, if you did not qualify and you're the highest handled person, then the WHT is going to pay for your $1,090 entry into that Sunday contest. We'll tweet that out with words and stuff. It'll look much better than how I just explained it on the fly.
But pretty cool, yeah. If you handle the most in WHT qualifying events or feeding events on DRF tournaments, chance to get bought in by the World Horse Players Tour to that special big boy last chance qualifier happening on that Sunday. Chris, I want to give you a chance to talk briefly, because we're running out of time, but about any particularly exciting events coming up for folks looking to qualify for next year's National Horse Players Tour Championship event, seats for which will also be part of the WHT contest over Preakness. But anything fans should be aware of coming up?
Well, one thing I do want to promote a little bit is you mentioned the Hawthorne contest was it was taped, and the first half of the contest aired last Saturday morning. It's also available on YouTube if you look at Horse Players Invitational, if you look that up. And the second half of the contest will be aired on Saturday morning, and it will also be available on YouTube. And if you have NBC Sports Chicago on Dish or DirecTV, you can watch it there, or Comcast Sports. I'd encourage you to do that if you like contests. I'm really excited about the upcoming Preakness contest that you guys are involved with.
Are you playing?
I plan to attend, yes.
Awesome.
I've already booked a hotel and a flight out there, so I'm looking forward to that. And I really think getting contests on television is a great idea. It's a great way to promote contest play. So I encourage people to watch the Hawthorne contest. Get on the YouTube, take a look at that. I participated in that. Didn't have a perfect outcome, but I had a lot of fun, and I did do fairly well. I won't be, no spoiler alerts here. I won't tell you who wins or anything if you haven't already heard. But contests are great. Getting them on TV is a great idea. So, I'm hoping to see more of that in the future. I know you guys are feel the same way.
We're doing our best
to make that happen.
We are doing our best.
So I'm really looking forward to all of that.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, Chris. If you send that link around, I'll happily retweet it to my followers. Maybe we can help get some momentum for it. Awesome. And I also want to let it be known for folks who are who do know the outcome because they read a certain piece of mine. I did get explicit approval from tournament director Mr. Walsh before I revealed that. I was willing to write it as more of a tease thing, and he said it was okay to release the spoiler. I didn't want to be accused of telling you that Bruce Willis was really a ghost or whatever, handicap and contest equivalent. Okay, that is all the time we have. I want to thank Matt Bernier, TV's Matt Bernier, TV's Chris Larmey. I don't know where's Jonathan Kinchin. And most of all, I want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening. The show's so much fun because of the feedback that all of our listeners have. Thanks to producer Craig and AJ, Willie Nile, and Travis Stone for helping us out with our intro. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal. We'll be back on Friday. May you win all your photos.